Hello everybody, Bruce here with a short video on how to use floating in a two-column fixed width layout. This is directly from the textbook. It's on pages 204 through 205. And this is what's pictured in the textbook, and I modified it a little bit to look like this. So essentially, this is a fixed width layout. If we resize the browser window, notice how it stays fixed. The width, right, of the aside and the main, essentially the width of the entire body is fixed, right? And it's also centered on the page. So let's step through the markup here in Visual Studio Code. Actually, I'm going to swipe back here. I do give you the code, the same code that I'm looking at. I broke it out so you can download that, unzip it, and open it up inside of Visual Studio Code. So we have a pretty simple HTML set of tags here. We have a header with an H2, we have a main with an H2, and a side with an H2, and a footer with an H2. Right? So how do we get this little bit of markup, right, to look like this right here? Well, let me show you. Let me explain it to you. I highly recommend that you first go through the chapter in the book, right? So what I did here is I just did a global reset with that asterisk where I set the margin and padding to 0 everywhere for all elements. On the body, I set the font family to Verdana, followed by Geneva, Tahoma, and Sans Serif. I set the width of the body to 962 pixels. That's the width. So believe it or not, that's the width from here to here. Okay, that's the width from edge to edge. I set the background color to this beautiful blue. I gave it margin top and bottom of 50 pixels and auto adjust the left and right margin. And I gave the body a 1 pixel solid black border. Okay, so I think you can see it all around here. This is the border of the body. Okay, so the next thing is let's skip over the H2 for now. Let's go to the header. So the header is easy. I just gave it a border on the bottom of 2 pixels solid. It's a flavor of black there, and a background color of white. So by default, right, that's taking up this entire space right here, and inside there is an H2. Okay, simple. Okay, block level elements, right, like header, take up the entire width of their container, which happens to be the body. Okay, so let's look at the main content and aside. So the main content has a height of 350 pixels. Now this is where we have to kick in the box model. The width is 600. Okay, the width is 600. And if you go back up to the line 11 where it says width 962, if you remember from the box model, right, the box gets calculated based upon the width, the borders, and any padding and margin that you have established. So this right here, go back, it's 962. Remember that number, 962. Because 600, and I have the aside here, and 360 is not the total of 962, right? It's not. It's actually 2 pixels short. Okay, it's actually 2 pixels short. Actually, is it 4? Let's do this here. Let me just do this. 600 and 360, right? So watch. 600 plus 360, right, equals 960. And I said here the width is 962. So the main, right, has a border right and left of 2 pixels. Okay, the main has a border right of 2 pixels. So it's only adding 2. So 600 plus 2 is 602, right? So 600 is the width. Then we need to add the 2 pixels here. And we add then the 360. And since there's no padding, margin, or border. We don't need, on the left and right, we don't need to add anything. So again, this plus any margin or padding plus the width here plus any border, margin, or padding needs to add up to the total width defined here. Now, what happens sometimes is you'll define a width, and then what you're going to need to do as you add padding, margin, and border, you need to subtract on the left and right from the width. Okay? Because if you make this too big, like if I made this 610 here, you see what happens, right? So the numbers have to add up perfectly so they look like that. All right? So on the main, we have the width, and then we're floating the main to the left. We're floating it to the left. And then for the aside, which is on the right over here, we're floating that to the right. You see that? We're floating that to the right. So you can actually float, watch this. Let me just show you here. You can actually float them both to the left, but it makes more sense when one is floated to the right and one is floated to the left. Okay, so from an earlier video on clear and floats, if you don't have this defined right here, clear both on the element below floated elements, you see what happened here? The footer looks wonky, right? So you need to clear on the left and right any floated element, and now this looks correct. Okay, so a lot going on here. The box model is super important. If you didn't pay that much attention to it, it's time, because you need to know the box model. All right, so thanks for watching. If you have questions, you know where to find me.